Hello, my name is Nadia Bodkin. I am the co-founder for the Rare Advocacy Movement. I am also the CEO for Blaze Therapeutics and one of the founding members for New Love Ventures. Irrespective of all the titles, at the core, I am a person born with 3 rare genetic conditions who began as a rare disease advocate during my university years and then evolved into a community-based activist for the medically complex and disabled community, most of which are people like me living with rare conditions. For over a decade, I have been working with other fellow community-based activists and community-dedicated allies to address the various issues that stop life-saving therapeutic treatments from making it to the market, and for therapeutics already on the market from being made accessible to every person who needs them. Today, I would like to help bring awareness to the importance of community-based activism and allied patient advocacy efforts by discussing the importance of establishing mutually beneficial stakeholder collaborations within the rare disease ecosystem. To understand the importance of establishing mutually beneficial stakeholder collaborations and the real world impact of not working together, let's first explore the current ecosystem. The rare disease ecosystem is a vibrant space comprising of 4 intertwining landscapes: the academic landscape, consisting mainly of universities and hospital systems; the advocacy landscape, consisting of nonprofit patient advocacy groups, charities, and 501c3 organizations; the industry landscape, consisting of the biopharmaceutical, biotechnology, and other healthcare focused or corporations that contribute to either bringing therapeutic services or products to the market or streamlining the therapeutic development process. And most importantly, the community landscape, consisting of the real world people living with a rare condition, chronic disabilities, medical complexities, and their carers and family members. The signing of the Orphan Drug Act in 1983 ignited the advocacy landscape, a sector of nonprofit organizations where several nonprofit business professionals have partnered with industry and academic-based stakeholders to advocate for what they believe are in the best interests of the community. In 2017, community activists chose to begin professionalizing themselves in an effort to separate from the advocacy landscape for various reasons, effectively forming the community landscape. For those of you also active in the disability rights, autism, and Down syndrome communities, you'll notice that this is not only a historic moment for the rare disease ecosystem, this is in fact a global event triggered by the widespread practice of exploiting and data mining patient stories, insights, and experiences, the exclusion of community-based insights from advocacy-focused decision-making and program development, and the regular duplication of efforts that originate from within the community as opposed to joining the community's efforts in collaboration. Another reason community-based activists around the world are choosing to establish a clear distinction between the advocacy landscape and the community landscape is because of the community's need to protect community-dedicated nonprofit organizations, much like CDH International and others, whose missions have never veered away from serving the best interests of their community. Community-dedicated nonprofit charities are the community's lifeblood, regularly standing up against industry-focused silos with large budgets and funding power. For the community-dedicated charities that choose to stand strong and remain committed to serving and protecting the interests of the community, they're often slowed down by bottlenecks strategically placed within the advocacy landscape designed to cause burnout for the charity's leadership. The toxic advocacy environment is extremely hard to navigate as a community-based charity because the silos are often well-funded and regularly working to maintain strategies that result in either complete burnout and the closing of the charity or caving in to acquire grants that shift the charity's focus away from the community's needs and towards exclusively accomplishing industry's agenda. Either way, the current advocacy environment is a complex landscape with its own competitive ecosystem where wealthy silos work hard to maintain strategic bottlenecks and paywalls to keep those outside of their industry-focused group from influencing their agendas. While the advocacy landscape plays an important role in the commercial sector as a whole, these exclusive silos are toxic to the initial stages of drug development and are tied directly to clinical trial failures. For this reason, the community landscape has established itself and built its own protected workspace within the rare advocacy movement called the Living Rare Estate. The Living Rare Estate is the first community-based stakeholder collaboration model where community-focused allies from around the ecosystem can connect directly to patient communities and identify community-dedicated organizations. So, to understand how toxic competition in the advocacy space impacts those of us with chronic medical conditions and our medically complex loved ones, let's do a quick review of the process to bringing meaningful treatments to a community. So the way it works is that a total of 13 different types of stakeholders ideally work together to bring a scientifically promising treatment from the preclinical stage of research and development, also known as animal studies, through three clinical phases, also known as clinical trials. This process is strictly managed by regulatory agencies like the US Food and Drug Administration, the European Medicines Agency, and others. For the sake of today's discussion, however, we are referencing the US clinical trial process, but the same principles of collaboration can be applied internationally. So you will notice that the patient community is the first stakeholder listed. This is because the patient and their loved ones are literally the only stakeholder in the entire therapeutic development process with the most at stake. The patient doesn't just have a vested financial interest because there are indirect financial costs and implications that patients often acquire when participating in a clinical trial, but the patient community is also the end consumer. So, whether or not a treatment makes it to approval often equates to a matter of life and death for the community. And the stakes can continue even beyond the point when a treatment is approved because families with limited to no insurance coverage unfortunately have then to battle their insurance companies for accessibility. So it may seem obvious that in order to successfully bring a promising treatment to market, that the pharmaceutical company or the research team developing the treatment would make sure that patients, caregivers, and care partners are consulted with so that the community informs the design of the trial, the implementation strategies, the protocols, and not someone who is learning about the disease from Google or reading Facebook's discussions, and that the appropriate endpoints have been identified for approval purposes. But unfortunately, that's just not the case. Nearly 14% of all drugs in clinical trials win approval from the FDA. This is a huge problem for the patients and the people who love them because for those companies that don't abandon their clinical trials altogether for business purposes, the higher the development costs, the higher the price of the treatment when it makes it to the market. For those of you wondering what is the major reason clinical trials fail, the academic landscape establishes that 75 to 80% of clinical trial failures are due to problems with efficacy and or safety. Now, this is huge because this is irrefutable evidence that the current industry landscape has yet to truly align with the people of the community and are instead consulting with the wrong people, predominantly mega million dollar nonprofit organizations whose executive teams have absolutely no lived experiences, but are somehow still marketing themselves as qualified to consult industry partners on clinical trial design, structure, protocols, and even endpoint establishment. When you say it out loud, it's laughable for people who simply follow logic, but for people like myself with lived rare disease experiences and dedicated community based advocacy work, it's frustratingly discouraging and quite honestly heartbreaking. Treatments are being mismatched during the preclinical phase because industry partners are distracted by advocacy based silos. Biostatistics reports that, broadly speaking, orphan drug development has significantly lower success rates, with only 6.2% of drug development projects reaching the market. This is directly correlated to the fact that industry has partnered with the wrong rare disease landscape in order to identify indications, design clinical trials, and deploy community engagement protocols. Inaccurate stigmas regarding the patient community not being sophisticated enough to partner with industry has produced bottlenecks within the advocacy landscape that are essentially designed to blind industry stakeholders to how sophisticated the community landscape has become and stop industry stakeholders from recognizing community-based organizations and comprehensive advocates that are vital to establishing programs that effectively improve and save lives. In the advocacy landscape, the practice of establishing silos and bottlenecks is so prevalent that it has become an expected survival practice deployed by advocacy based organizations, groups, and affiliated consultants. The impact of these toxic competitive silos and life-threatening bottlenecks has resulted in the global patient care and ally community uniting and officially separating from the advocacy landscape, because while the failure of clinical trials may financially and professionally impact the stakeholders that work in the industry and advocacy landscapes, the literal lives of patients and their immediate carers are impacted. When a treatment isn't matched to the appropriate indication, when the wrong endpoints are chosen, when the design is unrealistic and burdensome, the list literally goes on, and it doesn't have to. Life is hard, but it can be quite beautiful as well. Butterflies are life's beautiful reminders that no change worth experiencing comes easy. The one thing that life with a rare condition, or the process of loving someone with a rare condition, or with any medical complex situation teaches you is the importance of continuing to make life beautiful. One of the beautiful things about the community landscape is that it isn't new. Community-based advocates date as far back to 1964 during the failed attempt to include legal rights for the disability community into the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And yeah, there are a lot of failed attempts to get society to see people of our community as people first, but it has been even harder to get industries to value our perspective, insights, and experiences as competent professionals. But one thing that history has shown us is that we win when we unite and work together. Failure is success if we learn from it, and history can help us identify viable solutions to today's issues. So in terms of lessons learned, there are several. For the sake of today's discussion and time constraints, I'd like to bring your attention to 3 of the main lessons that history has taught the patient and carer community. First lesson history has taught us is that a unified, persistent, connected patient and carer community that works together has the power to establish sustainable, meaningful solutions as determined by the people of the community. The second lesson is that the community can evolve and professionalize, but until a majority of those within the community recognize their own worth and intrinsic value, advocacy and industry-based stakeholders will continue to exploit patient stories in industry-focused marketing campaigns, and the clinical trial process will continue to hemorrhage capital. What this means is that if you are being asked to share your personal story, hard-earned insights, and lived experiences on a platform that is not community-based, then you should be getting paid based on the established fair market values. No community-based advocate should be speaking for free at any industry-based or industry-focused conference, summit, or congress. And the third lesson is that until industry evolves to truly value the patient community as an equal stakeholder, opportunities to establish mutually beneficial relationships will continue to be redirected towards the business professionals that took the advocacy landscape from the community. Unfortunately, there are too many organizations in the advocacy landscape that are disconnected from the real world community they claim to serve. If you are unsure as to whether an organization or a charity group is authentically dedicated to the community, or if it's all a show and their true loyalties lie in exclusively serving the industry, all you have to do is ask questions. If a group refuses to engage with you and refuses to answer questions that establish transparency and accountability, then chances are they are not community-based or community-focused. And just as a side note, for those of you that want to support the community landscape and its growth by asking questions and holding advocacy organizations and charities accountable to transparency practices, please be courteous of the leadership and teams that you submit your questions to. If you're submitting questions to learn more about procedures, sustainability, measures of success, patient assistance programs, etc., then be prepared to follow through when providing your support once the organizations have taken the time to answer your question. Asking questions is actually amongst one of the several ways the rare advocacy movement is working to help identify community-based charities to collaborate with and support as well. So to all of the amazing allies that are dedicated to serving the people of the community, real-world insights inspire meaningful solutions. And in order to obtain real-world insights, community partnerships are required. A good way to remember this is to keep in mind the community's motto, nothing about us without us. And to those that are fellow members of the community, let's continue to nurture the community landscape to remain collaborative and not become so toxic where meaningful collaborations that are truly patient focused no longer happen organically. Having the willingness to learn and to ask questions when unsure can be a guiding light to taking meaningful action and to making community dedicated goals inevitable. In closing, let's continue to explore mutually beneficial collaborations between the community and community-focused allies, but choose to protect and stand up for the best interests of the greater community by rejecting any potential community damaging requests made by industry-focused stakeholders, advocacy-focused stakeholders, academic-focused stakeholders, anyone who is essentially not community dedicated. Remember, not every grant offering is an actual community dedicated opportunity. Before ending today's discussion, I'd like to bring your attention to an upcoming national holiday called Making Life Beautiful Day, which takes place on June 11th. I look forward to celebrating Making Life Beautiful Day with all of you, with the ultimate goal of supporting community-based organizations and collaborative initiatives. Thank you.